For years, he showed up in the same shop, on the same channel, wearing the same loyalty to a brand that wasn't his name on the door. The audience knew his face. They knew his laugh. They knew exactly where he fit inside the world Robbie Layton built. What they didn't know was that the whole time, quietly and without announcement, Colton Thomas was building something else entirely. By the end of this video, you'll understand not just what Colton was doing behind the scenes, but why the story of how he left tells you more about how YouTube crew culture actually works than anything Robby Layton Nation ever put in a thumbnail. Ephraim, Utah is the kind of place that doesn't apologize for what it is. It sits in Sanpete County, population under 7,000, surrounded by mountains and the kind of flat agricultural distance that makes the sky look bigger than it should. It is not a YouTube hub. There are no content houses. There are no production studios. What Ephraim has is a work culture that runs deep, and one man who figured out how to point a camera at that culture and turn it into something the internet couldn't look away from. Robby Leighton started documenting his automotive work in 2013. He ran Leighton Auto Body and Paint, a collision repair and restoration shop at 758 N50E in Ephraim, and he began uploading the work: vehicle rescues, full restorations, body and paint jobs, off-road builds, to YouTube. He wasn't performing a character, he was filming the job he was already doing. By the time the channel matured, it had grown past 500,000 subscribers and accumulated north of 189 million views. The content formula was simple, and it worked. Real shop, real crew, real builds, genuine chaos, and just enough personality to make it feel like you were watching friends rather than professionals. The crew was never a prop. On Robby Layton Nation, the guys in the background matter. They are part of why people come back. They bring texture and humor and continuity to a channel that could easily feel like a one-man show if Robby weren't surrounded by people who actually know what they're doing. That dynamic, a rotating, recognizable group of people, all orbiting one central figure, is the exact environment Colton Thomas stepped into. What made that environment work also made it complicated, because when you become part of someone else's crew on camera, you become part of their brand. Your face, your jokes, your skills, they all belong to the content. The audience knows you, but they know you as part of something, and that distinction between belonging to a brand and building your own is the thing Colton Thomas quietly spent years navigating. And here's the part that changes everything about what you just heard. The thing about crew members on YouTube channels is that the audience rarely knows their origin. They appear, they work, they become familiar. But the question of who they were before the channel, what they brought with them, what they wanted out of the whole arrangement, that almost never gets answered on screen. The format doesn't make space for it. On a shop channel, the build is the story. The crew are supporting characters, and supporting characters don't usually get an origin episode. Colton Thomas was embedded enough in Robby Layton Nation that he operated two separate social media presences tied to the channel. One was branded directly to the show, the @Colton Robby Layton Nation account on Instagram, which functioned as an extension of the RLN content ecosystem. Show up, post clips, represent the brand. That was the on-screen Colton, the 500,000 subscribers recognized. But the second account told a different story. Under Colton Thomas, Colton ran a personal Instagram that was, from the start, framed around something distinct from the shop. The bio he wrote for that account is 4 sentences, and they are worth reading carefully. He described it as a place to show behind the scenes of the life I lived, past tense, and what he is currently doing. That language is not accidental. The life he lived, not the life he's living. Past tense about a chapter that was still technically ongoing. That's what a double life looks like in the social media age. Not a secret identity, not a scandal. 2 parallel tracks, one public, one quietly personal, running at the same time, only one of which the audience could see. At SEMA 2024, Colton was still there, still part of the crew. Robby Layton Nation brought a built-out off-road bread van to the Onyx Off-Road Build Challenge, a project that required the full shop effort, and Colton was part of the team that made it happen. From the outside, nothing had changed. The brand was intact, the crew was intact, and Colton Thomas was still the familiar face in the Layton Nation world. What happened next is the reason this story spread across the internet. After SEMA 2024, something shifted. Exactly when, exactly how, and with exactly what words exchanged. None of that has been formally stated by either Colton or Robby in any widely documented public forum. What has been documented is the audience reaction. And in the world of YouTube community culture, The audience reaction is often the first place the story becomes real. By January 2026, multiple YouTube videos had been uploaded by commentary channels specifically dedicated to answering one question: what happened to Colton from Robby Layton Nation? The titles varied. Some asked directly, some framed it as a mystery, but they all pointed to the same fan community reality. A familiar face had gone quiet, and the people who watched Robby Layton Nation regularly had noticed. This is a pattern that plays out across crew-based YouTube channels more often than the creators who run them tend to acknowledge. The audience builds emotional investment in the supporting cast. They return week after week, partly for the host, yes, but also for the chemistry, the recurring faces, the sense that they know this particular group of people. When someone from that group disappears without explanation, the comment sections fill up fast. The questions don't stop until an answer arrives, and sometimes no official answer ever does. What's striking about the Colton situation is how long the questions persisted. A Facebook group post surfaced with community members asking Robby directly, "What happened to Colton?" The phrasing in those posts, "Your worker Colt," told its own story about how the audience understood the relationship. He was a fixture. He was expected to be there. His absence read as a gap in something familiar, not just a staffing change in a business nobody knew personally. The questions kept coming, and here's the answer they never got, until now. The personal Instagram account Colton Thomas built under his own name was not a side project, it was a runway. His bio didn't describe a hobby. It didn't describe a way to share vacation photos. It used the word channel explicitly. The account was positioned, from the start, as a content platform tied to his own name. Not Layton Nation, not Robby's shop, Colton Thomas. That distinction, small as it sounds on paper, represents an enormous amount of intention for someone who was simultaneously maintaining a separate branded presence for someone else's YouTube operation. This is the part of the story most coverage of crew departures gets wrong. It frames the exit as the event, as if the leaving is where the story starts. But the leaving is almost always the end of a process, not the beginning. For someone like Colton, the process started the moment he created a separate identity under his own name while still active on the channel. The moment he wrote a bio that put his own channel, his own content, his own story at the center of how he wanted to be known. That's not a betrayal of anything, it's a recognition. A recognition that being a familiar face on someone else's channel and building a platform of your own are two fundamentally different things, and that the first one, however good it is for visibility, does not automatically convert into the second. The audience that knows Colton from RLN belongs to RLN. It does not automatically follow him anywhere. That's the hard math of crew-based YouTube, and it's the math that every supporting cast member eventually has to run. Most people in his position stay longer than they should, because the shop is comfortable, because the audience is already there, because starting from zero on your own terms is harder than showing up where you're already known. Most people who know this story stop here, but the real story starts right now. To understand what Colton Thomas was navigating, you have to understand what Robby Layton Nation actually is as a content structure. It is not a solo creator channel, it is a shop channel. That's a meaningful difference. Solo creator channels, the kind where one person is the brand, have a single point of failure and a single point of success. The personality either connects or it doesn't. Shop channels are more complex. They derive their appeal from environment, from recurring cast, from the texture of a real working place with real working people. Robby is the center, yes, but the shop is the world. The world of Robby Layton Nation was built on San Pete County culture. It ran on Utah work ethic and the kind of automotive skill that doesn't get learned in school. Robby had been doing the actual work, the body work, the paint, the fabrications, since at least 2014 when he was first formally associated with Layton Autobody. The YouTube channel grew around that work, not as a performance of it, but as a documentation of it. The crew members who appeared on the channel were not hired talent. They were people from that world. People who already knew the shop, already knew the work, already fit into the culture Robby had spent years building before the camera ever turned on. When you come up inside that kind of environment, your identity and the brand's identity get tangled in a way that's easy to underestimate. You're not an actor hired to play a role. You're a real person doing a real job that also happens to be filmed. The authenticity is the point. But that authenticity cuts both ways. It makes the connection with the audience feel real, because it is real. And it makes the exit feel like a loss, because for the audience, it genuinely is one. Colton Thomas didn't just leave a channel. From the perspective of the people watching, he left a community. And that community, months later, was still asking where he went. One phone call, one conversation. That's all it took to change the direction of everything. Here is the practical reality Colton Thomas faced when he started separating his own identity from Robby Layton Nation. Robbie's channel had cleared 500,000 subscribers. Total views had crossed 189 million. The Facebook page had over 71,000 followers, actively engaging. There was merchandise. There was a TikTok presence with over 285,000 likes. The brand was real, the audience was real, and the cultural footprint was real. By any measure, Robby Layton Nation was a successful mid-tier automotive YouTube operation with genuine staying power and genuine community loyalty. Against that, Colton's personal Instagram launched with a fraction of those numbers. His personal account sat at roughly 1,600 followers. His own branded content presence was in its earliest stages. The gap between what the Layton Nation brand offered in terms of audience size and what Colton's personal platform offered was not small. It was enormous. That gap is exactly why most crew members don't leave when they probably should. Visibility is addictive. Being part of something with real reach, a real audience, and real cultural momentum feels like proximity to success, and for a while it is. The problem is that visibility borrowed from someone else's brand doesn't compound into your own equity the same way. Colton's face was recognizable to hundreds of thousands of people, but that recognition lived inside the Robby Layton Nation ecosystem. Outside of it, the name recognition dropped sharply. Starting over means accepting that gap, accepting that you'll put out content your own way, with your own name, and the audience that knew you somewhere else won't automatically follow. The creator economy is littered with people who knew this math and made the move anyway, because the alternative was spending another 3 years building someone else's brand while your own sat waiting. And if you think that was surprising, stay with me because this next part is why the whole story matters. Colton Thomas is not the only person to walk this road. The departure of crew members from successful automotive and trade channels is one of the most consistent stories in the blue-collar YouTube space. Matt's off-road recovery built a crew that became individually recognizable, and when crew members left or shifted, the audience reaction was the same pattern. Questions, speculation, comment sections that wouldn't quiet down. Diesel brothers built a world around a team, and the cast changes over the years became mini storylines of their own. Barnwood Builders, Welker Farms, any channel that relies on a recurring group of real people doing real work faces the same structural tension. The people on screen become part of the value proposition. Their exits register as losses, even when they're completely reasonable human decisions. What makes the crew-based channel model powerful is also what makes it fragile. Robby Layton Nation built its identity around authenticity, around a real shop, real people, real Utah culture. The moment any one of those real people decides their own story goes somewhere else, there's a seam in that authenticity that the audience can feel. This is not a criticism of how Robby runs his channel. He has built something genuinely successful, and the evidence of that success, the subscriber counts, the SEMA presence, the brand partnerships, the community engagement, speaks for itself. But every shop show in the automotive YouTube space operates with the same underlying risk. The people who make the show feel real are also real enough to have their own lives, their own ambitions, and their own reasons to eventually walk out the shop door. Colton Thomas did what many in his position have done. He stayed long enough to understand the business, long enough to build some recognition, and long enough to know what he wanted to build that was different. Then he made the move. He never talked about this publicly. Until now. The personal account under Udusbar Colton Thomas is the clearest window currently available into what Colton Thomas is building. The bio describes the project in the most direct terms he's offered publicly. Behind-the-scenes content, personal updates, and a YouTube channel tied to his own name. Not RLN branded, not shop branded. His name, his identity, his content decisions. The audience he builds from this point forward will belong to him in a way that the Robby Layton Nation audience, however much they liked him, never fully could. That is both a harder path and a freer one. The harder part is obvious. Starting a YouTube channel without the built-in momentum of an established platform means slower growth, fewer early views, and the unglamorous work of proving you have something worth watching on your own terms. The recognition he built at RLN is not transferable in bulk. Some portion of the Layton Nation audience will follow out of genuine affection for who he was on that channel. But the majority will stay where they already are, watching the shop they already know, and Colton will have to earn a new audience from scratch. The freer part is equally real. Every decision made on a personal channel belongs to the person whose name is on it. The format, the tone, the content direction, the pace, all of it runs through one set of priorities, not a shop schedule, not a collaborative brand, not the creative needs of someone else's channel. Just Colton Thomas, making the content he wants to make, building the audience he wants to have. His Instagram bio used past tense for a reason. The life he lived, the crew member years, the shop camera years, the years of being recognizable inside someone else's brand, is the chapter that sets up this one. Not because anything went wrong, but because when you spend enough time showing up in someone else's story, eventually the pull of your own becomes too strong to ignore. The story of Colton Thomas and Robby Layton Nation is not a scandal. It is not a falling out that needs a villain. It is something more interesting and more honest than either of those things. It is the story of what happens when a real person builds real recognition inside a real community, and then has to decide what that recognition is actually worth when it's attached to someone else's name. The answer Colton arrived at, based on everything he's doing now, is that it was worth exactly what it gave him: a starting point, experience, a face the automotive YouTube audience already knew, and enough clarity about what he wanted to build next to actually go build it. His personal channel is in its early stages. The numbers are small, the audience is still forming. That part of the story is still being written, and the direction it takes depends entirely on what Colton Thomas is willing to put into it on his own terms. Away from the shop in Ephraim, away from the established brand, away from the safety of a platform someone else built. Here's what nobody watching Robby Layton Nation in 2022 or 2023 could have predicted. The guy turning wrenches in the background had already started laying the groundwork to step out front. Do you think Colton made the right call stepping away from Robby Layton Nation to build his own platform? Or did he walk away from the best audience he was ever going to have?